Our second speaker for this afternoon is Srimati Lopa Gandhi. From the urban vistas of Mumbai, now let me take you to the rural zones of Jharkhand. Very close to Bombay, I think. She has chosen to spend her expertise, where 19 of its 24 districts are qualified as aspirational districts, and where the Ugam Educational Foundation has been doing some wonderful work. Mrs. Lopa Gandhi, with her 25 years of experience in the field of education, is the founder of Ugam Education Foundation, a registered not-for-profit organization that envisions a world where the outcomes and experiences of education are meaningful for all. Its mission is to ensure girls experience an empowering education and become role models and community leaders through individual, institutional, and systemic change. Ugam works to empower adolescent girls in rural Jharkhand through Shiksha, Shakti, and Abhivyakti, or voice and agency. Mrs. Gandhi has vast experience in teaching adolescents, curriculum design and development, and has worked in various senior positions with Akanksha Foundation, Kaivalya, Muktangan, Antarang, Transform Initiative, to name a few. I'm sure it'll be very interesting to get a completely different perspective to what most of us may be familiar with in Bombay. Thank you for being here. Could I request Manisha Ji Devle, Secretary Chinmaya Mission Mumbai, to welcome Lopaji. If I can invite Srimati Lopa Gandhi to come and address us now.
I had practiced at home that I will stand up here and say good afternoon, but I think I will now say good evening. So मेरे लिए तो पेशेंट रहना आसान था क्योंकि मुझे तो बोलना था, पर I think great thank you to all of you. आपको सुनना है और फिर भी आप इतने पेशेंट हो. So thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here, and I feel both a sense of pride and also a sense of humility to stand in front of this audience. Also, I would like to say a big thank you to all the organizers, Swami ji, Milind ji. मेरी आदतें थोड़ी ख़राब है, तो बाई चांस मैं जी बोलना भूल गई तो आप समझ लेना है जी सबके पीछे. So Milind ji and Chandrika ji for giving me this opportunity. What I have to share is going to be quite different, I think. It's a different world that we inhabit back in Jharkhand, where my work is. So I'm assuming it will sound quite different, but just hear me out. The central theme or the guide... कुछ करना है? अच्छा. So the central theme or the guiding principle of G20 and therefore C20, of which this is a part, this conference is a part, has been Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. I'm sure all of you already would have known, and if you didn't know, you've figured out by 4 o'clock today, what the meaning and the genesis of this really wonderful idea is, right? This idea urges us to look at the world as a set of deeply interconnected and interdependent entities. It urges us not to see the world as us and them. Of course, diversity exists. The idea is not that हम सब एक जैसे clone बन जाएं. So of course, diversity exists, and it exists in nature, and that's what makes nature so beautiful, right? And it also exists in our human world. So each one of us sitting here today is different, and each one of us is unique with our own characteristics and dreams and needs and aspirations. But the idea is that beneath or beyond, whichever way you want to look at it, beyond these differences or diversity, there is a deeper connection that binds us together, the way families remain and are bound. It is literally to say that there is no us without them, and there is no I without you. And that, I believe, is what Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is trying to see. I am here today to speak about how this idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam interacts or intersects with the world of education, the world of schools, teachers, students, and across different geographies. I have worked for the last 25 odd years, and since 2015, I have worked very, very actively in rural education when I set up my organization, Ugam Foundation. As I thought about अच्छा वसुधैव कुटुंबकम और schools का क्या connection ढूंढेंगे? So the two words that came very strongly to my mind were inclusivity and equity. And I think that's what families do, and that's what our schools should be doing, and they also do it. Yes, there can always be room for improvement, but pretty much I see that happening a lot in government schools. So let's hold these two thoughts of inclusivity and equity through the evening as we talk more. But before we move ahead, let's do a little quiz, right? So how many of us here can point or label Jharkhand on a map of India? Some of us can, great. I thought I should, when I was rehearsing this with my husband, he said, we are Gujarati. So he said, Ari, aava questions nahi mukai. And I said, no, and I put this question because my mother, even after 8 years of working in Jharkhand, still says, "Tu kya gaili? Peli kya gaili? Chhattisgarh kase gaili?" And I have to say, "No, mummy, I went to Jharkhand." So, but great. How many of us can name the capital of Jharkhand? Perhaps the same people, I'm assuming. And what about words like sabar or ho or santhali or rao? Do these words have meaning for us? Right? Perhaps many of you know all this. Maybe some of you don't know all of this, right? But yeah, you've guessed it right. Oh, sorry, I forgot to press this. Okay. But yeah, okay. So that's Jharkhand in eastern India, for those of you who didn't raise their hands. Capital Ranchi. You've guessed it right. Ugam's work is in Jharkhand. I wasn't sure I'd be introduced or not, so I wove it into the talk that I was meant to deliver. So yeah, so that's our work in Jharkhand. That's where we work with rural schools in Jharkhand. Before going forward, let me introduce you to one person. Meet Hiramuni. Hiramuni is this young tribal girl, adolescent girl actually, belongs to one of the tribes in Jharkhand. Maybe she's from Ho, or she's a Santhali, or she's from Orao. She lives in a village in one of the 24 districts that are present in Jharkhand. 100 years ago, if Hiramuni had been 5 years old or 6 years old, the question of whether Hiramuni would attend a school would not have arisen, because 100 years ago, most girls in most parts of India did not attend school. And probably she wouldn't have attended school either. Since then, in the last 50, 60, 70 odd years, we've made significant change, right? And today, if a Hiramuni is 5 or 6 years old, most likely she will attend a primary school that's in her village or closest to her village. So a lot of the girls now attend our primary schools. Having said that, let me also put in a word of caution that even today, we can't say that every single Hiramuni who is 5 years and 6 years old is in a primary school. And that's work for us, for all of us here, right? So Hiramuni attends a primary school. In primary grade enrollment, we have achieved gender parity, which is fantastic, right? When you go back from here this evening, I'm sure nobody is going to sit at a dinner table and going to discuss, अच्छा चलिए थोड़ा चर्चा कर लेते हैं कि your daughter or your sister, क्या उसको 12वीं तक पढ़ना चाहिए? Will she go and complete her undergraduation or perhaps even post-graduation? These are not conversations we have at dinner tables in our homes. Unfortunately for Hiramuni, that's not true. that most certainly will be a conversation at dinner table, in dinner, whatever, in her house. Right? Most likely, Hiramuni will complete grade 5 in the village school where she went, and also most likely, she will stop schooling after grade 5. While we have achieved great gender parity in primary school enrollment, जितनी लड़कियां प्राइमरी स्कूल में एडमिशन लेती हैं उतनी ही लड़कियां 12वीं कक्षा पास नहीं करती हैं. And for a variety of reasons, I'm not going to go into the details of what those reasons are. Many of them you would already be aware of, right? So Hiramuni, unfortunately, is likely to drop out after grade 5 as she's meant to go to middle school and then high school. It is exactly to support the education of girls like Hiramuni, who are coming from vulnerable, marginalized communities, who live in fairly remote and backward areas, that Government of India started a residential school program. These residential schools are run for girls. They are called Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, which is the KGBV in red, which you read at the top, right? So each of these Kasturba Gandhi schools is meant only for girls. Like I mentioned, they are residential. They start from grade 6. The big thing with KGBV schools is that they are designed first to be in backward districts and blocks. And 2, they are designed to reach out to some of the most excluded, most vulnerable, most marginalized families and communities. All the girls in KGBV are from below poverty line families. They come from vulnerable social groups like SC, STs, OBCs, minorities. Even within this, girls who have dropped out of primary school, girls who come from single parent families. And Jharkhand has 260 such schools spread across its 24 districts. And in that sense, I find KGBVs to be very, very inclusive. They are creating the space where girls who might not have had access to higher education get that access. So that brings us to the idea of what does Ugam do? So Ugam, like I said, works in rural India, in Jharkhand with rural schools. We work particularly with KGBVs with the idea that every girl receives empowerment and education and causes positive social change. Right? This brings us to the idea of inclusion. We spoke about the two ideas, right? Inclusion and equity. So we circle back on the idea of inclusion and what it means, right? So today, a Hiramuni, irrespective of her background, her gender, her ability, gets admission into a Kasturba Gandhi school, thereby making sure that irrespective of where she comes from, she has access to age-appropriate educational setups. And in that sense, I feel it's a great initiative from the Government of India. KGBVs exist not just in Jharkhand, but across all the states in India. Because by design, they are meant to be in educationally backward blocks and districts. You can imagine in which states we will find more KGBVs and in which states we may find slightly fewer KGBVs. Right? So that's on the inclusivity part. And that part largely we find not just in KGBVs, but also in other government schools where we go. Okay, so let's come back to Hiramuni. So now Hiramuni is in a school, very good. She's going to continue grade 6 onwards, and in Jharkhand, every KGBV goes from grade 6 to grade 12. And in different states, there may be some variations because education is a state subject. Different states have taken on slightly different models, right? So Hiramuni is now all good, right? She's in a school, she's going to study, she's looked after. So what are the challenges Hiramuni will face now that she's come into a Kasturba school? It's a residential school, she's away from home. What are the challenges she will face? As well as what are the challenges someone like Ugam or me or you face if we are trying to create equity for Hiramuni? Right? What kind of treatments, what kind of opportunities, what kind of processes should the school have so that it creates equity for every girl who is a Hiramuni? Correct? What does equity mean? We mentioned equity, right? So equity means that we create and provide opportunities, create and provide materials which allow every student to reach his or her full potential, right? So Hiramuni, does she enjoy songs and stories? Has she learned to question gender roles? Is she learning at her grade level? Or has she learned to think critically and express her opinion? These and many such questions as these shaped our work in Ugam, in the KGBVs where we are working, which is across, like I said, 260 schools in Jharkhand, right? So that shaped our work. We said, okay, let's work around these things. And in the shaping of that work, we put our work across 3 broad themes. Our 3 themes are Shiksha, Shakti, and Abhivyakti. Shiksha is pretty self-explanatory, has to do with learning. Shakti, where we talk about health and wellness with the girls. And Abhivyakti, which is loosely translates as voice and agency. And within each vertical, there is a whole set of different activities. I mean, just to give you an example, under Shakti, the first thing we would like to do is bridge the learning gap. Because जब लड़कियाँ छठी कक्षा में एडमिशन लेती है, तो उनकी घर की भाषा हिंदी नहीं है, right? So अब मतलब इंटरनेशनल लैंग्वेज, नेशनल लैंग्वेज अभी लोकल भी नहीं, ये हाइपर लोकल टाइप की बात हो रही है. बिकॉज बहुत सारी लड़कियों की घर की भाषा या मातृभाषा हो है, संथाली है, सबर है, सादरी है. उसके बाद वो घर से निकल के मार्केट जाएगी, मार्केट में वो कोरठा सुनेगी, भोजपुरी सुनेगी, मैथिली सुनेगी. जब स्कूल आएगी तो सडनली हिंदी सुनना शुरू होगा. सो अब इंग्लिश का तो आई डोंट नीड टू टेक द ट्रेजेक्टरी फर्दर एट ऑल, राइट? So the first thing we want to do is bridge the learning gap by providing some kind of a remediation support to these the newcomers, new girls. Secondly, we also talk to the teachers and the older students about using newer pedagogical method. Shani ma'am spoke about some really cutting edge technology and cutting edge pedagogical methods. I wish we could use that all. हम बहुत पीछे हैं. तो हमारे लिए टेक्नोलॉजी ऑफ कोर्स यूज़ हो सकती है, बट इट कम्स विद इट ओन, मतलब पावर होना चाहिए, इंटरनेट कनेक्शन होना चाहिए, पावर हमेशा चालू रहना चाहिए, कनेक्शन हमेशा चालू रहना चाहिए, वगैरह वगैरह चीज़ें. एंड बियॉन्ड दिस देयर इज़ ऑल्सो अ ह्यूमन एलिमेंट इन दैट द स्टूडेंट्स एंड टीचर्स हैव टू हैव द मेंटल माइंड सेट टू बी एबल टू लर्न फ्रॉम अ मीडियम टू विच दे आर नॉट यूज्ड to for a long time, right? So within the context of where we work, we try and get teachers, influence teachers to use newer pedagogical methods. With the school itself, we would ensure or facilitate the creation of a robust library so that every day girls are using that library. Library होती है स्कूलों में, इस्तेमाल नहीं होती है, तो उसको हम कैसे इस्तेमाल करा सकते हैं, right? With Shakti, we largely talk around adolescent girls' issues, and not all are only girls. I mean, I strongly believe the boys need to hear and learn all this just as much as girls. It's just, मतलब हम सारा काम तो कर नहीं सकते, तो हमने अपने काम की मर्यादा सीमा बांधी है. वो सीमा है girls and KGBV schools. So in Shakti, we speak about changes during adolescence, menstruation, gender roles, anemia. Jharkhand is in the top 3 states with maternal anemia, women anemia, and therefore also stunted, low weight. मतलब माँ ही एनीमिक है और अंडरवेट है, तो बच्चा तो कोई परफेक्ट हीमोग्लोबिन वाला और बहुत ही बढ़िया सा वेट वाला आना मुश्किल ही है. So we talk about anemia, we talk about mental health, and we are trying to create small support groups within the school itself. क्योंकि हालांकि झारखंड में काउंसलर्स कम है या साइकाइट्रिस्ट कम है, साइकोलॉजिस्ट कम है, उसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि मानसिक स्ट्रेस कम है, राइट? सो द नीड्स ऑफ द ह्यूमन माइंड कंटिन्यू irrespective of the availability of caretakers or not. In Abhivyakti, which largely translates, like I said, as voice and agency, we try and make processes participative. We particularly work with, every school is meant to have a children's parliament. So we try and work with the Children's Parliament, and we try and work with the assemblies in schools to make them more democratic and more participative. Why these three? Because we believe कि अगर इन तीन चीज़ों पे काम होगा तो हमारी बच्चियाँ डॉक्टर बनेंगी कि नहीं, इंजीनियर बनेंगी कि नहीं, मुझे नहीं पता है, पर हमारी बच्चियाँ कम से कम इतना बनेंगी कि वो कॉन्फिडेंट होंगी, क्रिटिकली सोचने वाली होंगी, सवाल उठाने वाली होंगी, और वही एक रोल मॉडल और लीडर बन के आगे जा सकती है अपने समुदाय में, अपने समाज में. So this is where our work is, and we work in partnership with the government because the schools are run by the government. The next challenge after this was, ठीक है आप एक हीरामुनी के लिए तो ये कर लोगे, आप खुद पढ़ा लोगे, आप जो भी करोगे, but for one Hiramuni or 20 Hiramunis to do this, it's challenging, but it's not some huge challenge, right? How can we bring equity and inclusivity for the thousands of Hiramunis who are there, right? If I say only about the KGBVs in Jharkhand, the 260 schools that I spoke about, each reaches out to 300 to 400 girls. So that's the kind of number we are talking about, and this is only in KGBVs. Of course, there are other adolescent girls outside KGBVs in Jharkhand and in the rest of India. So we were troubled by this because Ugam में हम एक ऐसा सोचते हैं कि हम जो solution ढूंढेंगे उसको जितना systemic बना सके तो ही वो sustainable रहेगा. Otherwise, लोपा जब तक रांची flight लेके जाएंगी, करेंगी, whatever, then it will work till then, and potentially after that it may just lose steam. So as we were thinking about it and discussing this and scratching our heads during COVID time because we couldn't go there, and because we couldn't visit the field and the schools closed down, this challenge became even more pertinent because पूरी हमारी सोच स्कूल पे लिमिटेड थी ना. स्कूल जैसे जब आप एक संस्था चालू करते हो तो lot of people come and want to mentor you and give you very good advice, and one such advice is कि आपको रिस्क फैक्टर का लिस्ट बनाना चाहिए, ये करना चाहिए. तो बहुत लिस्ट बनाया था कि फंडिंग ख़त्म हो जाएगी, ये हो जाएगा, वो हो जाएगा. वो लिस्ट में कभी भी ये नहीं था कि सरकारी स्कूल बंद हो जाएगी 2 साल, right? And all of us were caught by surprise. The world was caught by surprise, and that's when the challenge became much more pertinent and relevant for us. And we came up with this whole idea that why not one Hiramuni facilitating change and empowerment for other Hiramunis. That gave rise to our fellowship program. We run a fellowship program for the alumni of Kasturba Gandhi schools. These are young women. They've passed grade 12 from a Kasturba school. Many of them are continuing to do their undergrad studies in a local nearby college. Some of them have dropped out. Some of them are married. Some of them also have a child. We reached out to these young women and we run a fellowship program with them. The idea is that we interact with them, discussion, बहुत सारी चीज़ें होती. We challenge them, discuss, nurture, push. We push them significantly to, for the first time, travel away outside their homes. And when we first time took them from one district to another district in an overnight train, I still remember हमने सबके अलग-अलग berth book किए थे क्योंकि रांची से रात को train निकलनी थी, and next morning we were going to reach another district, Dumka, which is on the border of Bengal. तो हमने सबके अलग-अलग berth book करके रखे थे. Suddenly in the middle of the night I lost sleep. I got up and I'm seeing the berths are all vacant. And I said, अरे बाप रे कहाँ गए ये सब? And suddenly they are all like huddled, 3 people in one berth. So I said, अरे ऐसे क्यों चिपक के बैठे हो, सो जाओ. So saying नहीं वो अकेले हमको डर लगता है. The whole night they didn't sleep because the train would move, and this was their first experience traveling in an overnight train, and they were worried that it's going to go off tracks. So I mean, this is in a lighter vein, but the fact is that when we even proposed this to them कि दूसरे district चलोगे क्या, they said कि आप मम्मी पापा से बात करो, and I was very firm and so was my team. I was very firm. I said नहीं मैं नहीं बात करूँगी. मुझे जब करनी थी तो मैंने whatever 35 साल पहले मेरे मम्मी पापा से बात कर ली थी. ये एम्पावरमेंट आपका होना है, राइट? तो ये नेगोशिएशन, ये हिम्मत जुटाकर बात करना, वो आपको करना है. वी आर नॉट इन अ हरी. आप 2 दिन में हिम्मत जुटा के बोल सकते हो तो 2 दिन लीजिए, 2 हफ्ते लगेंगे तो 2 हफ्ते लीजिए, 2 महीने लगेंगे तो 2 महीने भी चलेगा. बट that conversation with the father, with whom many of them had not spoken for months together, has to come from you. And they managed. They did that, and so all these kinds of experiences are taking them on their own journey of empowerment. एम्पावरमेंट, अगर मैं किसी को कहूँगी कि मैं तुम्हें एम्पावरमेंट कर रही हूँ, एम्पावर कर रही हूँ, तो वो शब्दों में ही आयरनी है ना. कोई किसी को एम्पावर कर नहीं सकता. कोई हो सकता है या नहीं होगा, वो उसकी मर्जी. Right? So we create and curate lot of these kinds of experiences for our fellows, which sets them off on a journey of empowerment. One significant part of that journey is that they go back to the KGBVs and they facilitate these sessions with the young girls in class. And it's a great moment for them. I rarely cry, and I'm not... I rarely cry. I'm not a very emotional person myself. But that's when first time I saw it, I felt, wow, kuch to ho raha hai. So the fellowship program has 2 big advantages, we believe. Because they are alumni, there is a strong case for relatability and sustainability, both. Right? मैं जाके कितना भी अच्छा लेक्चर दूंगी, KGBV में जो लड़की बैठी है वो सुनेगी मुझे, because they are just soft, nice human beings who will lend you a ear, or they are afraid that the warden may come and yell at them. But deep down उनके मन में होता है कि ये बातें सब कर रही है, पर उसकी लाइफ तो अलग है ना. मेरी लाइफ तो ऐसी, मेरी लाइफ उसकी लाइफ से तो बहुत ही अलग है. So what things apply to her don't apply to me. But when my fellow stands there and speaks, because she comes from the same village or similar villages, she stands there and says, भाई 5 साल पहले मैं ही आपकी तरह बेंच पे बैठती थी. So that relatability is very strong, and therefore very easily they become role models. So the idea is that each of these girls becomes a leader, a role model, and brings about positive change in her community. For us, this is our belief, our strong passion, that if every girl starts to do this, that's what is going to cause change at a large level, at a systemic level. This is what equity and inclusion will look like, and this is what will change the ground reality in Jharkhand schools and communities. That brings us now back to, so what about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam? Right? Where does all that fit here? I see it every day. I want to live it every day. Some days it's easy, and some days it's a challenge. Because I think all these ideas, right, about inclusivity and equity, they are anchored, or they rest on this very solid bedrock of love, respect, and empathy. I strongly believe that it's only love, respect, and empathy that can survive and that can sustain. It's only love, respect, and empathy that will help individuals and societies and countries survive and sustain. And while it's very beautiful to say this here, it's not often very easy to find this in your day-to-day life and your day-to-day work. There will, at least for me, there have come times when you said, "Arey, ye log samajhte kyun nahi? Main itna keh rahi hu." Or there may come a time when you will say, "अरे भाई छोड़ दो, अपने पिताजी को इतना भी नहीं बता सकती तो हम नहीं काम कर सकते." Right? So it's constant reflection, I think, for each one of us to keep making sure that we continue to imbibe this spirit. As I close this, I want to bring it back to each one of us. I want to stand in front of the mirror and say, what does Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam mean for each one of us? Outside this hall, अभी आधे घंटे में 1 घंटे में ये तो खत्म हो जाएगा, हम सब जो भी ऑटो उबर गाड़ी लेके घर चले जाएंगे. But if the idea is to survive. What does it mean for me and you and every one of us, right? Am I willing to go out and understand other people's realities? Am I willing to be silent enough to observe? Am I willing to listen to others with a heart? Am I willing to have a mind and a heart which is large enough to accept others? From the context of Ugam, my request, submission, suggestion is, please do that. Please come to Jharkhand, meet our girls, listen to them with your heart, share yourselves. And whether you do it in Jharkhand or Ugam or whether you do it anywhere, I can assure you that that experience will only leave you richer than you were before. मतलब वो लड़कियों का कितना भला होगा वो देख लेंगी, but जो यहाँ से जाएगा वो तो richer ही लौटेगा, वो बहुत मेरा दृढ़ विश्वास है. And I think that's also a way that we can imbibe the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So thank you very much. And for even those who raise their hands for knowing the capital of Jharkhand, the top one is called Olchiki script. It is Santhali, and I can't read it, but I think it's trying to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I request you to remain with us. One world, one earth, one future. Two different perspectives from South Bombay to Jharkhand. And that's what diversity is all about. And I think they're all our people and we're all one. I think the challenge remains in how to make the two marry. Who can play a role, whether corporates can play a role as well. That would be an interesting discussion. I wish we had our corporate panel here to ask that question. We will be taking some questions after a bit, but we have a little moderated question and answer session. And I'd like to invite Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai, who will be posing questions to Ms.Lopa Gandhi. So Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai very humbly initially asked his questions. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to introduce you then. Is from the University of Mumbai Department of Philosophy. Dr. Pillai is the founder director of the Chanakya Institute of Public Leadership. He has done extensive research on Kautilya's Arthashastra, the well-known book on management written in the 4th century BC, and available the course from the Chinmaya International Foundation, CIF, Kerala. With nearly 20 years of combined work and business experience, he is a well-known and sought-after management speaker, trainer, author, and consultant. He has written nearly 200 articles and papers for various magazines, newspapers, journals, and periodicals, including the Times of India Group as a weekly columnist. His first book, Corporate Chanakya, has been on the bestseller list since its launch in 2010, and is used as a textbook in various business schools in India and abroad. The book has the unique distinction of being made into an audio book, a film, Chanakya Speaks, and translated into 10 regional languages. He is a visiting faculty in prestigious institutes in India and abroad. He has been a trainer and a strategy consultant to over 200 organizations in the course of his career. I'm sure Dr. Pillai has very interesting questions of his own, and I request him to take it forward. But before that, I'd request Mukesh Bhai Trivedi, President of Chinmaya Mission Prakash Zone, to welcome Radhakrishnan ji with a memento of our appreciation. Over to you, Radhakrishnan ji.
Thank you, Milan ji. Only one thing which was missed out. I'm a Chinmaya product. Hariom. You know, everything that has been told is only what we say in our Chinmaya mission, Guru Kripa. Post-lunch session was so inspiring. Thanks to the Hiramuni story. It's going to remain with us forever. I remember the first time I went to Jharkhand, the role model was Mahendra Singh Dhoni. Even today, the World Cup winning captain, but you have taken us more deeper. And it's so inspiring to know that you have been working at the grassroots level. And Chinmaya Mission is also doing a lot of work at the grassroots level. We have Manisha ji over here. She's worked so many years in CORD, our rural organization, spent so much time and now heading it globally at CCMT. Let me tell you, friends, these are stories that need to go into textbooks. So my first story, or I would say from Hiramuni to NEP, the same question that I asked to Induji, at the government level, the policy level, there's a lot of major change happening. And as they say, from local to national to global. So in the textbooks, lot of local heroes are getting introduced. Because sometimes you hear about stories from abroad, nothing wrong in that. But what about local heroes? Even in our own, if you look at the design, we have Shivaji here, right? I was in Kolkata, I remember. There were heroes of local Bengali heroes there. So I think it's becoming more local. But as you said, from Maithili to Hindi, national, and of course, international and global. Looking at this particular concept, there's a lot of Indianizing happening of Indian education system. What's your thought at the grassroots level?
So of course, it's, you can hear me?
You can keep, yeah.
Okay. So of course, it's wonderful that we are recognizing the indigenous or the local, whether it's leadership, talent, whatever, and we are familiarizing the new generation or the newer, younger students with it. And even in Jharkhand, the state textbooks talk about Mahendra Singh Dhoni, Deepika Kumari. They talk about the local festival, Karma Puja, Sarhul, which is great because then at least the students there are getting familiar with that local culture. Because Jharkhand in particular, like so many states in India, is a beautiful and complex state. It is very multilingual. It has about 25% of its population coming from tribal areas. And again, even within tribe, ऐसा नहीं होता ना कि 25% लोग एक ही tribe के हैं. कोई 25 अलग-अलग tribe हैं, तो हर एक का अपना culture है, अपनी भाषा है, अपने तौर तरीके हैं. And so in that sense, it's really beautiful. The challenge becomes for NEP, and मतलब NEP क्या है? हम ही लोग हैं ना finally NEP तो. So the challenge is that how do you bridge this really vast, like the canvas is so big, right? How do you do that? How do I make Hiramuni proud of her tribal language, whatever, Santhali, but also ensure that she learns Hindi and she learns English, because she is probably going to need all of this as she moves into her future, right? So the challenge is there at very often. So yeah, I mean, that's...
Thank you so much. Even in the previous session, Induji mentioned about the generation Z and Alpha now. Whether we like it or no, as teachers, they will get exposed to Western education or Western culture directly or indirectly. Do you face this particular challenge where you have to strike between maybe an Indian education system and a Western education system?
So the space where we are working, very honestly, it's not a very big challenge. I can't right now think of even one girl who is saying, "Mujhe University of Bristol undergrad padhne jana hai." Because it's not, firstly, वो उसके मतलब उसके thought के horizon में भी है, वो है ही नहीं. Right? So it's not that मुझे जाना है, but because now I am so, my parents can't afford, so I can't go. So in that sense, that challenge isn't there. But the challenge of a different nature is there, because although while the girls are living in a residential school, they don't have cell phones. But when they go back, which is about 3-4 months, I mean, कोई भी school हमारे यहाँ 12 में से 8-9 महीने चलती है. So they go back home and they do have access to social media, YouTube, TikTok, what have you, which everyone. So there they do see other things, which may be not Western education, but Western styles of clothing, aspiration, aspiration for material possessions, those kinds of things, yes, they are very much there. Even more simple or complex things like opposite gender relationships, how they conceive about it, how they see it play out. So those things do affect them. Not so much the मतलब वेस्टर्न एजुकेशन या ऐसे तो कोई अभी तक तो कोई चैलेंज नहीं है. हमारा तो चैलेंज ये है ना कि भाई वेस्टर्न इंडियन छोड़ो, आप एजुकेशन में रहो, आप शादी मत करो तुरंत. Right? So that challenge is at that level. So that's why I said at the beginning कि वो मैं इंदू मैम के साथ मजाक कर रही थी कि हम मुंबई में रहते हैं, मुंबई इंडिया थोड़ी ना है. So the challenges that we face are quite different.
In fact, I remember when Swatmananji and Manisha ji asked me to moderate it, I was so impressed by your surname, Gandhi. And I'll tell you.
Well, not everybody agrees, but yeah.
But connecting to one of the very important lessons about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, when Gandhiji came back to India, even today the government of India celebrates Pravasi Bharatiya Divas on the day he returned from South Africa after 21 years. And his political guru told him, go and see India in the rural areas. India lives in villages, as his profound statement. Now, why am I asking this particular question is that I remember Swarupananji, the head of our Chinmaya mission, he was talking about various projects, and one of them about how rural people actually could do fundraising for us. And that is amazing case study. Now, the point here is that I still believe when you go to the rural part of India or the non-metro part of India, the values are there, ingrained in every family, in every individual. So coming back, since we are on the education track, what do you think are the values that these children practice in their houses, in their particular respective villages, that we can take as educationists globally?
So I think one thing that we find in India, more so in rural, but also fairly in urban spaces, is there very strong faith that पढ़ाई करेंगे तो जीवन बदलेगा. Right? So very religiously, students will turn up at the school. Definitely in rural, also largely I would say in urban. And that faith is a lot, and that faith does not bring violence in our schools. Like you hear about, when we've all read about in newspapers about violence in schools abroad, right? तो हमारे बच्चे और बच्चों के साथ पेरेंट्स में अभी भी वो एक there is a strong faith, almost like a divine faith, right? जैसे हम मंदिर में जाते हैं उसी टाइप का, and that brings them to school, and I think that's a very big plus. So that's one value. Even today in the villages, for the girls that we work and interact with, the family and the community is a very strong anchor. Of course, it comes with many positives, but it also comes with certain negatives, right? Because the community think then overrides individual thought processes. So there are pluses and there are minuses. But on the plus side, it is a strong support system. It is a kinship that they value, that their parents value. So I think these definitely, particularly from where we work, इतना अंडर रिसोर्स्ड है कि आप जाओगे तो आपको they will be infinitely patient with you. They want to hear you, they want to do the activities you do, they want to sing the songs that you sing with them, which is very refreshing sometimes, because when you go to a very privileged section, उन्होंने इतना सब कर लिया है कि उनको आप कुछ कराओगे उसमें वैल्यू दिखना डिफिकल्ट है, right? We don't find that in rural schools. So I think those are some of the things I can.
Thank you so much. You spoke on two words, inclusivity and equity. Friends, there's a statement, very powerful, that once I read. It said, what is the difference between a city and a village? In the village, the first person knows the last person. You mentioned about community and inclusiveness. And in a city, the first person may not even know the next person. Now, why am I placing this question? Because as you ended your speech, you spoke about so many leadership lessons. And I think the train incident will stay with all of us, right? They were all together inclusive. So any particular one more, probably a quality of leadership or an instance which actually shook you looking at these girls and their qualities of leadership that they display in your experience?
So when I interact with the girls, I am really और अभी कम struck होती हूँ क्योंकि बहुत बार कर लिया, but initially I would be very struck by the degree of resilience they display. It's amazing because very often I think कि if I was 14 and I was in that place, मुझे तो actually when I was 14 मुझे तो कुछ भी नहीं पता था except कि what frock will I wear or what sabzi my mother is cooking tonight or something like that, right? They are tremendously resilient. They talk about and they share about the difficulties they face. We were once talking about body image in our mental health module, and I was just thinking कि I said ये सब body image सब western notions है, हमारे यहाँ कुछ ऐसा होता नहीं है, ये क्यों मतलब खामखा करवा रहे हैं सब. But we actually had girls weeping because they were facing tremendous issues of body image, particularly with skin color. And there was this girl, Kajal, she actually stood up and she said कि मेरे KGB में सबसे होशियार थी, so notes लेना था या exam में support help चाहिए थी तो सब मेरे पास आते. But जब कोई photo, when it was time to take a photo, those same classmates would tell me that you go out of the frame because you are spoiling the entire picture. Right? So she has lived this. She has not, this is not a Fair and Lovely ad. Right? She has lived this, and there are many more such examples. I had one married, sorry, just I'll not take a long time, but I had a fellow who's married. So we were running a residential training camp. She came for that. So मैंने ऐसे मजाक में पूछा, I said, अच्छा अर्चना घर से कैसे permission मिल गई? तो first she said नहीं मिल गई. So I said, अच्छा तो काम कौन करेगा? Since you have come here. So she said, नहीं, मैं सारा काम, मैं सुबह 2 बजे उठी थी, मैं सारा काम, सबका खाना बनाना सब करके आई हूँ यहाँ. पर पता है क्या हुआ लोपा मैम? तो मैंने कहा क्या? मैं सबका खाना बनाकर निकली, पर जब मैं निकल रही थी तो मुझे किसी ने पूछा नहीं कि तुमने खाया कि नहीं. Right? On one level one can say ठीक है छोटी सी बातें हो जाएगा, but at another level it is very hurtful. And my fellows are living all this, experiencing all this, and still they have a smile on their face. They are not cynical. They are not talking only negative things कि ये बकवास है, कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. They are not defeatist. And I think that's a great learning for me when I interact with them. So I think that has struck me hugely. Their hunger for learning is huge. It's tremendous. That gives me a lot of hope and optimism.
Thank you so much. We see a trend in the society that typically people from villages come to cities, and from cities they go abroad. And now there is a trend of reverse migration also. A very beautiful example is the Zoho founder, Vembu sir, coming back to India and setting up his headquarters in a village in Tamil Nadu. Now coming back, I'm sure these girls are aspirational, but any suggestion to people, most of us being from cities here, how do we work and get connected back to the rural India, or what we really call Bharat?
So my technology से सब connect हो जाओगे, but पहले heart से connect होना है तो वहाँ जाना पड़ेगा, and there is no two ways about it. Technology will connect you with your head, and you will be able to do many lessons and teach many things to. The girls will benefit. And from Ugam, I'm saying the girls will benefit. But if you are going to sit in front of a computer screen and teach a lesson, I'm not sure how much you will benefit. So my very strong suggestion and request is go to Jharkhand or any village, wherever you are comfortable or you have some connections, but go there and talk to people, listen, sit in their homes, talk to their mothers, talk to their dadis, and that's where. I mean, just to give you an example, you said what struck you. So I do a lot of exam prep. Sorry, we can take time. Little bit? Okay. So I was helping girls with exam preparation, and one of the topics in some language exam is they have to write essays. So I was generally asking कि अच्छा कौन से topics पे ऐसे पूछे जाते हैं, क्योंकि आप सब जानते हो ना हमारे यहाँ तो फिक्स होता है ये 8-10 में से कुछ आएगा टाइप. तो उन्होंने कहा one such topic is crimes against women, and this was pretty soon, couple of years after this whole Nirbhaya and some of this really gruesome and sad incidents had happened, right? So I said okay, तो हम बात करने लगे. So I said okay, so why is there a need for an essay like crime? And I said firstly, why is it crimes? Why is there an S, not a crime? Why is the essay called crime against women? Why not an essay about crimes against men? तो ये सब ऐसे बातें चल रही थी. Then I said, okay, so what are the, according to you, what is the number one crime against women? And because they have qualified women, obviously, वो चोरी is not a crime against particular. ऐसे नहीं होती कि औरतों के साथ ही चोरी होती है, right? So from my newspaper reading and urban setup, I thought they will say rape. They turned around and they said Dayan Pratha. Witchcraft, witch hunting, Dayan Pratha.
Which?
WTCH.
Which?
Dayan Pratha. So for me, that was I said, oh wow, this didn't even occur to me because this is not something you hear about, see, experience at all, right? So this was, again, another like a wake-up moment for me, thinking, don't go with assumptions, go with an open and a blank mind. Only then if your mind is already cluttered with your ideas, there's little space for new ideas. So yeah, that was amazing.
I totally resonate with what you said. You have to be there. I remember when I had to study Kautilya Artha Shastra, I called up one of our Swamijis from Chinmaya mission, Advayananji, and I told him, Swamiji, I want to study Kautilya Artha Shastra. He said, not Kautilya, Kautilya. Idhar aao. I had to go to Kerala in a village. We have our Chinmaya Vishwavidyapit there now, Piravam, and one teacher, one student. And today I'm teaching globally. The idea of telling is that I think we have so much wisdom in our country, we just need to explore. I'd like to end up, before I hand it over to Milind sir, with one request. Let's have an exchange program. You come to Siddhabadi, because we're doing so much work there in rural, and we would like to come to your place also.
Definitely. It will be our privilege, very much.
Thank you so much. Hari Om.